All right. Thank you, Dark. And I'm going to be taking over next, going quickly through. And my series is none other than Kore Kaite Shine, also known as Draw This, Then Die. And this was one of the ones that was a little bit more hyped up in all the social media spheres leading up to this season. This same manga original, this that it was started in November 2021 in Shogakukan's monthly Shonen Sunday, one of their kind of bigger magazines by Toyoda Minoru. So Toyoda Minoru is an manga artist who has written a couple of other smaller romance rom-com series throughout the years. I think this one is the only one that they got adapted into an anime, but it did get adapted and by none other than Shinei Animation. So for those of you who don't know, Shinei Animation is quite a known famous series or studio. They've done Crayon Shinchan movies. They've done uh, Doraemon movies. Some of the other kind of like one-off stuff that they've done is Karakai Josu no Takagi-san, also known as Teasing Master Takagi-san, as well as Kakko na Inazuke, or a couple of cuckoos. So they have quite a decent amount of money to throw around. For this project team, director Akaki Hiroaki, who has done a couple of series with Shine, I believe, leads a mixture of his sort of core Takagi-san project team members. So most notably, that would be scriptwriter Fukuda Hiroko, and he, alongside his sort of core Takagi-san team, he gathered together some external people as well as some of his connections from his Jewel Pet days. So pretty solid team, I would say overall, with regards to doing something like this, especially the Takagi-san team. But yeah, pretty experienced overall. The voice acting cast is also pretty similar. Pretty much all of the veterans and pretty much all of the cast is like super veterans and name brands. You have Tanizaki Atsumi, Minase Inori, Inoue Kikuko, Hayami Saori, Yukana, just like down the line. Um, the only newcomers and up and comers are Fujimura Kanon. So for Fujimura Kanon, this is her first named role, and she voices one of the supporting cast members, as well as the up and comer in Saya Hitomi, or sorry, Hitomi Saya, who again also does another kind of supporting character in Fujimori Kokoro. But yeah, pretty experienced people both on the general animation staff side as well as the voice acting cast side. Going over to the OP and the ED for the opening, we have Isho, also known as in English that will be translated to Suicide Note by Tatsuya Kitani or Kitani Tatsuya. So Kitani Tatsuya is a longtime singer-songwriter, and he is also currently a Vocaloid P. And he is currently a bassist, the bassist for the trio Sacho no Hana. So Sacho no Hana is a mainly sort of anime focused trio band that has been doing a decent amount of themes and songs recently. But in terms of Isho, so Isho, the composition itself is an above average BPM, I would say, even for an anime OP. It is very like high paced. It's also very like electronic synth heavy. It's very kind of like Nika Nika Doga coded, Vocaloid coded, again, which makes sense because he is a former Vocaloid P. I would say the composition is overall okay for an anime song. And again, it's very like Nika Nika Doga coded. Um, the storyboard is quite good. I would say it would probably be one of the top OPs of the season in terms of the storyboarding. The standard like character introductions are done obviously, but the storyboard goes through a lot of these like different styles, and it kind of tries to stick to this, how I'd say, like manga being drawn theme, right? It has like the rough sketches sometimes being done, and then it gets like kind of fleshed in. It has a lot of like different animations. I do really like the way the opening is done storyboarding wise, and I would suggest you guys watch it. I would I say it will end up being like opening of the year. I don't know, but it is quite good. The ending is Conifer by Regal Lily. Regal Lily is currently a two-member girl band, I believe based out of Tokyo. I'm not entirely confident. Pretty standard J-pop anime song ending composition. slower BPM, guitar focused. The storyboard here is still honestly a lot better than a lot of openings out there these days, but it doesn't really compare to the opening of this series. But I would say it's still quite decent. Go over to the just general audio visuals of the series here. I do like the character facial designs or the characters, yeah, the character facial designs in this series. A lot of the mouths are like kind of jutted off to the side. It's very reminiscent of the kind of classic older cartoons, right? In the 70s and 90s, 70s or 90s, right? We have stuff like, Doraemon, Osamu-san, stuff like that. It's very reminiscent of those like kids cartoons, on purpose, obviously. And again, the actual animation alongside it is pretty quality in general and has a lot of these like different animations where they're like when they're like flipping through the pages and drawing and doing hurriedly. They do put a lot of effort into it, but it alongside that, there's a lot of other like variation in terms of what happens in the storyboard that are popping up, whether it's like chibi deformation, whether again it's like going back to the sketches and kind of being like, oh, it's kind of like a manga sketch. It's like drawing in and flushing, inking in kind of sequence, or whether it's like something else. There's a lot of different things that pop up. It almost reminds me of the old Silver Link days with who do why do I Onuma Shin and like the kind of
Right.
Silverlink days where they're doing like a lot of different styles. Most I would say probably the most famous example being Baka to Test, and they're doing trying just like a lot of different things. Um, and overall, the quality is quite solid. I would say. I don't know whether I'll be like, oh, there's some like sakugs going on or whatever, but there are a lot of very good scenes. I would say it's at least solidly above average, and the OST behind it does help support it properly. Behind the sort of more hectic pace scenes, there's a lot more kind of brass going on. It's not, I wouldn't say it's mostly silent. There is like a lot of BGM stuff going on constantly or here and there, but I would say it meshes pretty well with the visuals going on. Overall, quite like the stuff that they did is quite above average, I would say, visually, audio visually. So, even for just like that, I think it's worth checking out. In terms of the actual series, so quick synopsis here, we have the main character, Yasumi Ai. So Yasumi Ai is a freshman, first year high school student who lives on Izu Oshima, so he's kind of like far away from. She's a country hick essentially. She really loves manga, and she hears that one of her long admired but quite inactive mangaka will be exhibiting at Komitia. She sets off towards Tokyo to kind of visit her, maybe get a signed autograph copy of something, blah blah. So for those of you who don't know, Komitia is not like Comic. So Komitia is kind of a more general gallery. It's an invitation of like different famous authors and artists, and they kind of exhibit their works, right? A little bit more. Obviously, they can have like autographs and whatever, like signed, blah blah. But it's more like a meet and greet than anything else, right? So it's not like Comic. Comic is a little bit more just like they're selling stuff or just like people are presenting stuff at booths, but it's a lot more like selling. Hence the name like market, right? But Comitia is quite different. So she goes to meet uh so she goes to meet, the artist, and then it turns out, as fate would have it, uh the artist, Hoshinore, is very is actually somebody who is quite close to her in her real kind of network. One of her kind of teachers at school called Teshimare, and then the kind of it's not a kerfuffle, but they kind of get into this kind of back and forth discussion, right? And that kind of extends over the story of where Yasumi Ai is like, oh man, I want to draw manga. I want to get into this like the life of like making manga, the world of making manga because I love manga so much. And Teshima Rei, the mangaka and her one of her teachers, kind of is very adamant on not letting her walk down that path because she's kind of already experienced all of the crap that she's she's seen all like the bad stuff, right? Or not all the bad stuff necessarily, but it's like all the hard stuff that comes with it, all the failures, all the like the warts and stuff like that, right? The warts and bumps.
Would you rather be in a manhwa or a manga?
It depends. Probably a monk because there's a higher chance of just like getting some isekai, easy slow life isekai stuff. But so the rest of
You
the
don't want to
series,
be what is it? You don't want to be the solo leveler or the Tomb Raider
I mean, there's a
King
lot more like
or the
random
Tower
suffering
King?
in.
No,
There's a lot more like random suffering in Monha that you don't have as much in like a lot of these isekai series. So, but anyways, the rest of the story is kind of a free form, not well, not free form, but it's a general introduction and a fleshing out of the different characters. And I would say the form of the story is that while there is while there is obviously continual references to like drawing terminology to animation terminology, right? Like they'll be like filling in or inking in like a frame, and they'll be like put in the eye level, the eye line, then all this like different like the animation terminology to explain what they're doing as they're like kind of sketching and inking it in, right? But that's not really, I would say, the focus. It kind of serves as one of like the value, quote unquote, value adders. But a lot of the focus is again on the characters themselves, fleshing them out. Um, I don't know whether I would say it's necessarily their backstory. I think one of the good parts of this is that they don't focus too much on the quote unquote unique backstories of each character. And you might at that point you might be asking, well, Spire, what do you mean? Like they're not fleshing out unique stories. And that's isn't that supposed to be a good thing? And I would say not necessarily because what happens a lot of these times is that in stories where they focus a lot on these um backstories of the different characters, it kind of just ends up being a very like set of variants of backstories. Like, oh, you have an Ojo-sama who was forbidden from drawing, and then eventually she wanted to just be free or whatever it is. Or you just have a country girl who just wanted to draw, and then she met blah blah, and then she's now hardworking, she's not really a good artist, but she will be someday. Like it takes like a lot of these very standard variants, or like, oh, I was once a genius, but I was disillusioned by the world of manga or whatever, or the world of competition, and I stopped drawing. Like there's a lot of these like when you go into these backstories too much on why these different characters came to be, it often tends to go into these standard variants, and I'm not usually that impressed by it. So honestly, it's a pretty decent that they chose not to go too deep into these stories and focus a little bit more on the aspects of manga creation, of like what are the difficult parts, what's kind of happening. And that sort of it really is the main focus on um of this story. It's not really the backstory, it's not really the like techniques, it's really the trials and tribulations, the bad things that can potentially happen in general, right? In general, as you're trying to create manga, as you're trying to create art, like coming across being kind of lacking the creative fuel to get from an 80% series to like 100% series, right? um Trying to sell stuff or whatever at a booth, or but kind of being compared to others potentially in ways that don't really pertain to the manga series, but just kind of relate to you as a person, right? Kind of trying to sell yourself as a brand, and they go through a lot of these things that are sure like it happens in the industry, but it's also kind of general um trials and tribulations related to trying to make it out in an industry, especially trying to make it out in a creative industry, like again, making art or doing something like acting or whatnot. So I think I do like it. It's a good variant and it's more refreshing than the standard, like, oh, I used to make manga, but I had XYZ backstory or whatever it is. Um, that's I've become kind of tired of that sort of like backstory focused variant. And I think the while the story doesn't necessarily go into like super detail or whatever, or it doesn't necessarily super dive into kind of how do I say this, like psychological nuances or anything like that. It's more just like look how look how passionate she is about the manga or whatever it is, right? Um, I do like the series. I do like how it takes form. It is a little bit on the simpler side given the topic relative to the topic of the series, but I do like the overall package. Um, would I consider it an anime of the season or an anime of the year? I don't think I would, but it is definitely something that I would watch. Somebody compared it to um what is it? The a series that I also covered a couple of seasons ago. It was like uh Ego no Tainai Shokuba desu about it was like another kind of series that kind of relied a little bit more on comedy while talking about, you know, essentially the workplace, right? I think mangaka plus like the editor and like how they worked or how the mangaka didn't work, right? Because he was a little bit lazy. But I think like that series was not that inspirational because a lot it kind of just ended up falling back upon the comedy that it kind of provided, or I mean, it didn't even really provide that much comedy. It was not that impressive. But this thing is definitely has legs and it definitely has a direction. And despite it being a little bit more on the simplistic side, again, I prefer this sort of theme. I prefer this sort of focus of like, okay, what are the bad things or what are the hard parts of this industry? Why are we working so hard to like trying to create manga over some very standard like why did you come into manga making in the first place? What kind of like are you a genius or are you doing something like I'm not very into that sort of variant of storytelling that we see in Japanese anime these days. So I think overall this is pretty solid. Um, I'm probably gonna continue to watch it. I think this is worth a watch if you are, you know, a fan or if you are partial to these sorts of like um girls making manga, girls in the club doing stuff kind of series and want a more deeper dive than just like the girls doing slapstick comedy or just like comedy and just talking to each other. It is a little bit of deeper than that. So if you do like that sort of tone, maybe you want something a little bit deeper, I would definitely suggest that you check it out. My overall rating for this, I would say would be a 7. I would say it's a 7. Um, I don't think it's like quite anime of the season material again, but it's definitely solidly above average. I think Shine Animations does a great job with the overall audio visuals as well as the opening ending direction and storyboarding. And yeah, I mean, if you just want like a fun romp with a little bit of a deeper side to it and audio visuals that won't disappoint, I would say please do check this out. So
What would you rate the eyebrows?
the eyebrows
Yeah.
is not it's not quite Mugi level, I would say. It's not, you know what I mean? It's not quite Keamugi level, but I'd say it's getting there. It's
Not
we
bad.
need a
Not
little bit
bad.
more of that pickled radish. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, 7 out of 10. I mean, I'd say it's pretty solid. Again, it's not. I wouldn't say it's anime of the season, although this season is also a little bit hard to rate on that scale, just because it has a lot of
Pretty
heavy
stacked.
hitters. Yeah, yeah, but pretty solid overall, I would say. So again, this was Kore Kaite Shine, also known as Draw This, Then Die, manga original, adapted by Shine Animation. Pretty good comedy, pretty good kind of girls and I guess girls drawing stuff on, focus on the kind of drawing industry, manga industry, right? And some of the more generalized, softened versions of the trials and tribulations that they go through. So if you want to kind of experience that sort of mixture, please do check this out.